Hello, everyone. Namaste, namaskar to our attendees and esteemed speakers from Bangladesh, from Asia Pacific region and other parts of the world. Welcome. My name is Anju. I'm the head of Asia Pacific region for A4AI, and I am your host today. It is an honor and privilege for me to welcome you on behalf of our moderator, Ms. Elena Sapong, Deputy Director of A4AI, Mr. Shahid Uddin Akbar, our Bangladesh National Coordinator, and our colleague Maiko Nakagaki, who is our Senior Strategic Partnership Manager. Just a few virtual housekeeping rules. We have live streaming, and because we believe in an all-inclusive approach, we also have live captioning. It's on the top left-hand side of your screen, so feel free to use it if need be. You're welcome to use the Q&A, and feel free to reach out to me directly if you have any questions. My only request is that we stay humble and kind throughout this program. So let's all show a bit of empathy, especially towards people who have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and the recent flood in Bangladesh. I just wish to extend my deepest appreciation to the government of Bangladesh and other governments in Asia Pacific region for supporting the efforts in managing internet access during COVID-19 crisis and also during natural disasters. The topic of the webinar, Managing Internet Access Through Crisis in Bangladesh, resonates with me a lot, especially coming from a small island nation, Fiji. While we are dealing with COVID-19 pandemic crisis, we are also faced with other challenges, such as a natural disaster. But we continue to recognize and navigate the crisis, and we remain resilient. And crisis can happen to anyone at any time of the day. So we're dealing with a real crisis right now and have adjusted our program. Due to family tragedies and the flooding in the minister's district, our Honorable State of Minister and Honorable State of Minister, Mr. Zunaid Ahmed Palak and our speaker, Ms. Sonia Kabir, wasn't able to join us this evening. They've extended their sincere apologies to attendees and speakers. So before we start the main show, I would like to give you a quick snapshot on the A4AI work. And for this, please allow me to turn off the video for the session to save bandwidth. So the Alliance for Affordable, thank you so much, sorry, for your patience. The Alliance for Affordable Internet, A4AI, is close to 100 members. We are the leading advocate for affordable broadband. We work through a set of guiding principles called the good practices. The 1 for 2 standard indicates that no one should spend more than 2% of their average monthly income on 1 GB of data. We have an annual affordability report that tracks the policy progress made by countries towards achieving this standard. In each member country, we form a national multi-stakeholder coalition. We invite civil society, public sector, private sector, and all other stakeholders, key stakeholders, to identify key barriers to affordable access. And then we devise tailored solutions to drive prices down. We focus on 3 main areas to drive advocacy for policy and regulatory reform. One is international advocacy. We also do direct engagement, and we do robust research. So you can see that we have research and publication. These are just some examples on the slide. This is the snapshot of the 2019 affordability report, which shows the state of internet access in Asia. Although Bangladesh is listed as having affordable internet, it's important to note that the mobile broadband is unaffordable for about 40% of the population based on our research. So we feel that more work needs to be done to ensure affordable and meaningful internet access. 50% of the world is still unconnected to the internet. So during COVID-19, this number is anticipated to be higher because traditional locations of connectivity, examples, public cafes, internet cafes, public libraries, offices, and schools tend to shut down during lockdown. Throughout COVID-19, A4AI and the Web Foundation have been stepping up advocacy with policy briefs. And we continuously recommend governments, civil society, and other key sectors to take urgent actions to bring as many people online as possible. So, how has Bangladesh specifically responded to COVID-19? I would like to invite our keynote speaker, Mr. Anir Chaudhry, Policy Advisor for A2I, ICT Division within the Cabinet Division and UNDP Bangladesh. Anir will set the scene for the panel discussions, and he will also talk about the A2I perspective and key actions and opportunities. Please give me a moment. So I would like to now invite Anir Chaudhry to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anju. It's a pleasure to be here. Distinguished panelists, audience, organizers. What I'll talk about, as Anju just mentioned, is what Bangladesh has done to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic crisis in the last 4 months, and how are we trying to recover using digital technologies. As you all know, that our Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina announced Bangladesh to be a digital country about 13 years ago. So the target is to reach a digital status, a large digital status by 2021, which is next year, which is the 50th anniversary of our country's birth. So it's a large milestone that we've been working towards for the last 13 years. And that has made a big difference in the way we've been able to respond to the crisis using digital technologies and recover from the pandemic in some sense. So I'll talk about some of the preparation that has gone into this, but most importantly, I'll talk about what has happened in the last 4 months. So let me first talk about a few sectors, starting with health. We use digital technologies to do 4 things: understanding where the high-risk cases exist. Even before testing was done, we didn't have a lot of testing in the country in the beginning. So the first 2 months, we really had 1 or 2 test centers and maybe a few hundred cases that we were testing every day. So that number went up in the last month or so to about 15 to 20,000 a day. But we started with really nothing. So we had to use telcos and syndromic surveillance technology to identify where the high-risk cases are. And following with that is hot zone identification, where the largest disease-affected areas are. Then based on that, resource allocation for health workers, facilities, and all of that, and then timely policy response. So I'll give you an example of exactly, so this is a bit of a busy slide, but I'll just explain this very quickly. So this is one of the largest data collection effort in the history of the country, using telco data, where people would call in to a hotline, 333, and then they would use internet, they would use web apps, there'd be community workers visiting door to door. So all these would come into either internet or phone lines. We have collected in the last 3.5 months about 10 million reports. And that has given us an unprecedented way to do data analysis and then identify where the specific high-risk cases are and where the hot zones are. And that has given us a way to develop a doctor's pool with about 4,000 doctors who now treat patients over the phone. So this is the largest telemedicine service that has emerged in a matter of a month. Even though we worked with about 25 companies, telemedicine companies, this has become the largest almost overnight. And that has given rise to 4 dashboards. The first one for medical decision makers, the second one for administrators, and the third one for the public. So all this data analysis, the 10 million or so data that have come into this is analyzed, and we can make specific health decisions. I'll give you one example in late March to early April. So this is how the calls that are coming in are detected, calls with symptoms. And we've developed an artificial intelligence paradigm using this digital technology so that we can understand where the hot zones are. And this is an example of how we were able to detect hot zones, hot spots, 9 to 11 days before testing began. When we opened up lockdown, after about over 2 months of locking down the entire country, we needed to do restricted lockdown. And again, the similar technology that we deployed using internet and phones helped us to do restricted lockdown. So this is an example of how we have analyzed the data in Dhaka city, in about 60 different clusters, where we're now doing this restricted lockdown and do case isolation and case detection. And again, doing treatment in a local sense. This is an example that I talked about, that a byproduct of this work actually gave rise to telemedicine services over the internet and also using telephones, not only for people within the country, but also for expatriate workers. We have about 10 million expatriate workers in different countries. We've launched this in 2 countries so far, in Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, and we're discussing with Malaysia and UK right now. So we have citizens calling in from the country, from those countries, expat workers calling in those countries, talking to doctors in those countries, also talking to doctors in Bangladesh and getting the telehealth service that they need. So beyond COVID, we actually don't know what post-COVID word really means, but knowing that there's going to be an end of COVID, so what are we really planning to do? So the largest yet telehealth service provider that we are now working with, about 25 companies that I talked about. So public-private partnership for COVID-positive patients, elderly and the vulnerable, pregnant mothers and newborns, factory workers, and slum dwellers. So all these 5 are currently being designed. The first 2 have already been launched. And then we're also looking at innovative health financing using poverty data, occupational data, and health data. So merging all these different types of data to come up with new forms of financing for health. The story of poverty reduction in Bangladesh is quite well known. We've been able to halve poverty from about 40% to about 20% in the last 15 years. Extreme poverty also went down to about 10%. GDP rate, we sustained about 6% over the 10 years. In the last 2 years, we've seen about 8% plus growth. What will happen this year, we still don't know, but this is the story for the last 15 years, one of the highest GDP growths that we have seen around the world. And technology has really played an important role here. Some examples, during the pandemic, we needed to pay the social safety net beneficiaries. And for the last 3 years, we've been developing a countrywide digital platform to provide benefits to the beneficiaries directly, the old age allowance, widow allowance, and so on and so forth. So for 3 years, we've worked to raise that number from 0 to about 1.5 million. So just during the pandemic, this number shot up to 2.5. So basically, pandemic helped us accelerate. So this I call the COVID dividend. So we're actually getting some digital dividends during the COVID time. We had about 5 million new poor households that have come up. So these households were rickshaw pullers and street hawkers and construction workers who depended on daily wages. But during this time, the daily wages stopped. So they actually went below the poverty line. They were never in any of the social safety net databases, but we needed to create new databases using digital technologies, QR codes, in some cases even CCTV cameras for detection and all of that. And we now provide, using the same infrastructure that we built for digital payments, about 5 million households. So this is a new social safety net for COVID beneficiaries, so to speak. For the last 5 years, we've been working with the garment industry, which is the largest export of our country. Over 80% of the country's export comes from the ready-made garment sector. So 5 years, we digitized only about payments for about 2.5 million garment workers out of the 4 million. So within, actually no, 1.5 million. So we covered about 40% in 5 years. In about 2 weeks in April, that number shot up to 100%. So again, something remarkable happened. All 100%, 4 million garment workers are getting their salary payments using digital technologies now, mobile wallets, agent banking. And this was possible because our central bank, with our support from A2I, was able to come up with a bulk account creation using a limited electronic KYC, know your customer form. So again, this happened because we were able to make this very quick decision, policy decision within a matter of weeks. So what's going to happen after COVID? We have significant inclusion error in our targeting for social safety net, and also significant exclusion errors. So hopefully we're now looking at least not using yet, exploring the digital technology from the telcos, looking at behavior patterns of spending for calls, for data, and that will give us a proxy for poverty rankings. We're actually going to do a poverty ranking for social safety net beneficiaries in using an unprecedented way of targeting. This was tried out in a couple of countries so far in the world, and will probably be the third or the fourth country to try this. This is a crowdfunding platform that we launched, again, launched in a matter of weeks, because we were able to develop such technologies, and all we needed to do was repurpose and link older technologies to create new platforms. So this was launched in May, just before the last Eid. We have another Eid coming up in the next couple of days. So just before last Eid, we launched this. And this allows individual donors to pick platform of choice, to pick the donation managers of choice, like BRAC or Islamic Foundation or Bidyananda. These are major service providers in the philanthropy space. And an individual donor can actually make a small contribution using this app. And we have seen 80% of the donors actually have spent about $10 to $12 towards donation, which would not have been possible if this platform did not exist. So they just won't be able to make a $10 donation because the cost of the transaction is prohibitively high. With this app, that cost of transaction was brought down to almost zero. This is the story of Digital Bangladesh, digitizing about 2,800 services of the government. That's the entire government digitized. So we've done about 700 so far. The target is to do another 2,000 or so in the next 2 to 3 years. So that's been continuing and has been accelerated during the COVID period. So we have 4 different modes of service delivery. The national portal, which is internet, one app which was launched in January of this year by our Honorable Prime Minister. So that's one app capturing hundreds of services. Digital centers, which are access points in rural areas. We have about 5,000 of them across the country, which serve about 5 to 6 million people every month. So these people don't have direct access to internet, nor do they have enough digital literacy. So they come to these centers, which are run in government offices, but are run as public-private partnerships in a small business form. So they are run by entrepreneurs. They're not paid by the government. And this public-private partnership has actually created a new form of entrepreneurship, digital entrepreneurship, that did not exist in the country about 10 years ago. 333 is the hotline for the entire country. This has been repurposed, as I mentioned, for health, for education, for e-commerce recently, and this has become one of the significant lifelines for the citizens. In terms of building a digital government, we have seen a massive move towards paperless office. Again, acceleration that we have seen unprecedented in the last 3 months. We were working with many offices of the government. The target is to reach about 19,000 offices. The target was that we would reach them by 2021. But in the way that we have seen adoption in the last few months, that people are working from home, the government officers are working from home, solving problems, resolving files, making decisions from the safety of their home. And this has become very attractive. So we think that this will be accelerated and will reach our target of 19,000 offices of the government by the end of this year. Our court system was shut down for obvious reasons, and bail petitions were piling up, and we did not have space in our prisons to keep all these prisoners who would actually deserve bail. So the Honorable Chief Justice and the Prime Minister, they decided together that we would launch a virtual court system. Again, using technologies that we had built in the last few years, we repurposed, and a virtual court system was born. This took us about 12 days to do, and now 30,000 or so bail petitions have been resolved. So 30,000 people actually left the prison on bail. And seeing the success of this, the Chief Justice decided that this would not be just a COVID thing. It will become a permanent fixture of the justice system going forward. And that would reduce our hugely increasing case backlog. in the coming months. E-commerce took a new shape. We'd had e-commerce in the country before, but not in the rural areas. So during this time, e-commerce took rural roots. 116 companies worked with us in tandem. So we coordinated from A to I, all these 160 companies. So these are logistics companies, e-commerce companies, payment companies, which actually blanketed the entire country with e-commerce. One trend that we saw, remarkable, which was previously e-commerce used to be mostly luxury goods. About 90% of the e-commerce products were luxury goods. It became 90% of daily necessities. So what daily necessities used to be 10%, now it became 90%. So groceries, medicines, and all of that. And again, this large orchestration across the country really helped us. There are people who don't have access to internet, and they used phones. So 3335 was for non-internet users. They would call in, and we call it the P-commerce, phone commerce. E-commerce also branched out into P-commerce during this COVID period. Education took a transformation. So we took a lot of our education content over the internet, but interestingly, because only about 30 to 35% of the students in primary and secondary have access to internet, we had to take a large part of our content to TV. We have a underutilized TV channel called the Parliament TV, which is used only for Parliament broadcasts. And that was fully utilized during this time to reach to about 30 million students across primary, secondary, tertiary, and technical and madrasa education. And there are about a dozen private sector companies who've worked with us. Without them, this would not have been possible. So this is again another example of how old technology like TV and new technology like internet, with the help of public-private partnership, really transformed the education system. So what do we see going forward? Again, this is here to stay. We will not see this going away. So the two ministers of education right now have declared that this digital education system will become part of the blended learning going forward. And we are now negotiating with the telcos and the ISPs of the country to zero rate, or at least do reduced pricing package for the education platforms for the 5 different education streams that we have in the country. And we're also introducing a continuous assessment system for the 21st century skills using digital technology, this which would not have been possible without technology. In terms of skills, we are already seeing about 20 million jobs lost in the country in the last few months. But the new jobs are emerging. So we are predicting about 4 million new jobs which will be created in different sectors. So only 5 sectors are actually being shown here in agro-food, healthcare, ICT and e-commerce, pharmaceuticals, and creative media. So this is helping us design a new curriculum to make sure that we don't let this opportunity pass us by. So these 4 million new jobs will require new skills, and that's what we are planning to do. So the National Skills Portal platform that we have developed with the National Skills Development Authority of the Prime Minister's Office. So this will become much more sophisticated. It will actually have a lot of real-time data coming into it. We'll have predictive analysis, and this is what we're now calling the collective intelligence platforms, which will be, will work with the private sector organizations, associations to make this happen. Disasters. So Bangladesh is a country of disasters, not only just COVID, but we have all sorts of natural disasters. We're in the middle of one of the worst floods right now. We just had a cyclone a couple of months ago. So we have all kinds. And data from different sources, not only just databases, but also from satellites and maybe sensors that we'll deploy in future, will come into a centralized dashboard. So again, data from the past historical data and the new data from different projects will actually are coming into this dashboard. So we are seeing the early prototypes of this already. So this will help us going forward. So this is another example of how we can actually drill down to their area and then see development projects, how they're impacting or addressing that disaster situation. So I'm almost at the end. This is an example of how data from different organizations are coming together into this tracker that we call the SDG tracker. This was launched in 2017 by our Honorable Prime Minister at the UN General Assembly. And this has gone from strength to strength. Right now we see all government data providers pumping data into this so that we can make sense of data from all different sources and can make informed policy decisions. But as we all know, there are still huge divides. So the poor are still not connected. The girls and women of the country are less connected than the boys and the men. The persons with disability are getting the short end of the stick still. Refugees don't have any connectivity in the country. The internally forcibly displaced people in the country don't have reliable and affordable internet. And in the fragile and conflict affected areas, because of political conflicts or because of natural disasters, they're still not connected. So my last slide. So we're taking a six-pronged approach of digital transformation to improve our service delivery and policy making. The first is, as I said, empowering citizens with the 2,000 plus digital services. Second is ensuring a cashless society to making as much as possible payments digital, and also developing digital financial products like savings and credit and insurance. So that will be the next step forward based on the technology platform for digital payments that we have built across the country. Third is breaking data silos. We have a lot of data islands within the government and also with private sector. So developing or breaking down the silos and developing intelligent analytics, that work has already started. Repurposing, I've talked about a number of repurposing examples instead of building from scratch, because this gives us an acceleration that we have not seen before, and COVID has proven it. Making internet affordable to all. I'm sure our panelists will talk about how we can do that. We have tried, but we have not reached the goal yet. And building innovative public, private, and research partnerships across the board. And this has really helped us take things forward in a not only whole of government way, but whole of society way. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.
Thank you so much, Anir. Well done to A2I, in particular ICT Division and Cabinets Division in Bangladesh, for tackling COVID-19 crisis through the use of digital ICT solutions and technologies. It's also nice to hear that you have been negotiating with telco companies and operators to apply zero rate for education online platforms. I'm also happy to hear that you have been continuously mentioning private sector, which is a key player for the government. So once again, well done. Thank you so much. So without any further ado, I would like to invite our moderator, Ms. Eleanor Sapong, who is again our Deputy Director for A4AI. Eleanor will be highlighting the objective of this segment and introducing the panelists. This session will be interactive. So again, we will welcome you to ask questions and use the Q&A. Thank you. So Eleanor, over to you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And so far, it's been really exciting to see the work that's been done in Bangladesh by A2I. So I'm really keen to explore more in this session, and I'm sure the rest of the panel will also, that I have with me, would also be interested in sharing more insights on how they are also viewing this and what the opportunities are. So this segment is going to delve a bit deeper into some of the key initiatives that have been happening within the space. We have the view from the private sector, we have a view from the regulator, and we also have a view from the development sector as well. And so we are very excited to have with us 4 very esteemed panelists, including and as well as Anir, who will also be coming in to answer a few questions. So Anir, I'm not letting you off the hook. So I'm going to do a quick introduction of our panel. The first panelist we have is Miss Claire Sitop. Claire is the head of digital inclusion at the GSMA, which is the largest technology mobile alliance in the world. They work for the mobile industry. The digital inclusion section that she heads involves connected women, connected society, and assistive technology. So Claire, welcome. And then we also have Krista Baptista. Krista is the head of the Center for Digital Acceleration at DAI. DAI is at the front lines of international development. DAI's mission is to help make communities and societies more prosperous. So we have someone who can really speak to the issue of development and investment. Then we have Shahid Uddin Akbar. Shahid is a national coordinator for the Alliance for Affordable Internet in Bangladesh. Shahid has led ICT4D initiatives in Bangladesh and is currently working with the Women Innovation Challenge. He has worked on the e-agric strategy for Bangladesh and as well as the Bangladesh National ICT Strategy. And then we also have, we're very privileged to have with us the Director General of the Regulator for the Telecoms sector. He's in the person of Brigadier General Karim Majumdar. And we have him, he's the head of the Bangladesh Telecoms Regulatory Commission. So ladies and gentlemen, we're very pleased to have you here. So I'll start with you, Claire. What did you think of Anir's submissions about the work that A2I is doing? And how do you think that the role of mobile has helped these initiatives?
Thank you, and thank you very much for inviting me to join such an esteemed panel. It was a fascinating presentation and great to hear about all the work it's doing and the impact of COVID. So I think, as was alluded to by Nira, the mobile industry has really been a key player in this space. Really has been stepped up to sort of make sure that the connectivity is maintained. I would say that there's sort of 4 key areas where mobile operators are helping to kind of mitigate, curtail the spread of COVID. So I think the first area is around mobilizing resources to maintain critical connectivity. Mobile operators have been working hard to ensure that connectivity is there and maintain the download and upload speeds as well as latency. This has been really important to ensure that mobile networks are performing well in response to additional traffic. We heard in the previous presentation just how much is now going online. So this has been a really important area where the industry has been supporting. I think the other area has been around ensuring sort of access and affordability of mobile services. So helping customers to access and use mobile services. For example, recognizing some of the challenges that can come with buying data during these times where people can't travel as much. So, for example, extending customer account validity so that people can stay connected, allowing people to transfer balance from one user to another for free, again, to support people who aren't able to recharge or facing difficulties getting to do that. But also by offering special offers to improve affordability. As was mentioned, affordability is a key issue. So ensuring that helping it be affordable to access, and specific offers to support health practitioners. We've seen a number of those in Bangladesh as well. So I think the third area is around the mobile, the sort of big data analytics. And again, it was referred to in the presentation, operators working with, working on this COVID data intelligence system, mapping, how populations are moving between locations is really valuable in tracking the virus and understanding the way it spreads. So been a key partner in those activities. And I think the fourth area that I think the industry has really been also supporting and working is providing health information services. So enabling access to health information through voice, SMS, and apps, awareness campaigns, free COVID hotlines, for example, as well as access to the broader range of digital health services, including remote patient monitoring, telemedicine, and digital booking systems. So there's been a range of areas where the mobile industry has been playing a key role in this space, and it's been, I think it's also been referred to in the previous presentation. So I think that mobile industry is essentially a very key player in this area.
Yes, and it's great to hear all this because you just corroborated what Anir just said. Connectivity, digital payments, tracking, information services, these are all very crucial in a time of crisis. I also wanted to hear from you. I'm coming to you, Krista. What are your initial thoughts about the presentation about the initiatives that has been happening in Bangladesh, and how do you think DAI has been supportive of some of these initiatives?
Thanks, Eleanor, and thanks again for having me here to participate in this panel. I'm really thankful. And I've been working in the ICT4D and digital field for about 20 years, and DAI has been we work in about 100 countries, for those of you that aren't familiar with the organization, and we work across different sectors. And so I really appreciated hearing from Anir about the work that A2I is doing, because it does speak to this idea that really digital can support an ecosystem approach to development, and really looking across different sectors, and that ability to amplify the efforts of government and private sector and bring those together through the use of these digital tools. And that's something, you know, we've really seen across our programs in multiple countries, that that this potential dividend of COVID is that some of these longstanding barriers or sort of roadblocks that were in place for digital to really accelerate, really move forward, have started to, you know, move to the side. And there's a lot of momentum as we see both the need to have people more connected and able to access that information related to health, or to receive payments that before they could, you know, get in person. We really see that these barriers are being put aside. And the first step to that in many countries that we're seeing is around the regulatory environment and the regulatory space. So we're working, for example, through a USAID funded program in a number of countries to look at regulatory policies, look at things related to e-commerce, e-government, cyber legislation. And we're seeing that governments are really hungry to move that forward, to find those experts on the ground that can come in and advise them. We've been working in Myanmar on this, in Vietnam and in other countries. And then the other side of that is really connecting with citizens and increasing their digital literacy so that they can kind of meet some of these new tools and the new opportunities, and they can benefit from them in really tangible ways. So in Cambodia, for example, we're working on a tips and tricks to stay safe online campaign. That's a video campaign in Cambodia. Again, this mix that was so, I think, so interesting of the old and the new technology. So using things like TV and radio, as well as apps and the newer tools. So in Cambodia, we've created a program around, a video program around tips and tricks to stay safe online, to increase people's cyber awareness and digital literacy, so that they, as SMEs in particular, small and medium enterprises, switch some of their transactions from face-to-face to digital, they have the kind of the risks of digital in their minds, and they're able to assess those risks and sort of respond appropriately.
So I'm glad you did, I'm glad you mentioned the issue about regulation, because it's so important. If the regulatory environment is right, then you are more likely to see a lot more incentives and initiatives that are happening in the space. So that's why this is a perfect segue to go to the regulator who's here with us, Brigadier General Majumdar. I wanted to find out from you, during this period in Bangladesh, what specific regulatory initiatives have you put in place during this period in order to stimulate some excitement in the industry, and how has that been received? Sorry, you're muted. Brigadier General, we can't hear you. You're muted. If you can unmute. Yeah. Thank you. All right, I can hear you now.
Thank you very much, Ms. Eleanor, and also thanks to the team to keep me in the panelist. It's a great honor for me to be here as well. And in fact, as you have asked me about the regulatory intervention that had been taken place, in fact, if I start talking about that, first of all, what Bangladesh government and as well as the regulator have done, that we have declared this telecom services as an emergency services during this COVID period. So in fact, earlier it was not like an emergency services. So once it is being declared, then it has helped the stakeholders, I mean the telco ecosystem, all the stakeholders, especially the internet service providers, as well as the mobile operators, to work during this pandemic period when there were restriction on their movement, and they could not go, people were restricted to go anywhere. So this allowed us to ensure the backbone almost ready in every sector, so that kept the telecom sector fully operation by declaring that as a emergency services during this COVID period. Also that as Mr. Anir has already mentioned, that there are a few more steps that had been taken place, and where we regulator body has rendered full-fledged support to ensure all those. Just to make an example, that during this COVID period, in fact, there are certain things, in fact, the process involved of getting any services by any of the organization, there are certain steps and certain substantial amount of time spent in every places. Say, for example, as COVID mostly dealt with the health sector. So I take the example from the health sector. If I talk about that, our one of the very renowned hospital, Dhaka Medical College Hospital, they didn't have any online services. So once they applied for it, usually it takes about, the whole process involves in numbers of places, in number of stages, it about 3 to 4 weeks, but we have ensured that it goes about within 1 and 2 days only. And already Mr. Anir mentioned about that a few of the services like 333, then our DG Health Service, which was 16263, where they had some limitation about the capacity, about the bandwidth limitation. So we rendered all out support, in fact, with a very limited span of time. It took only 1 or 2 days to ensure that they are fully operated, or fully operational, and they can provide support to the general mass. So in fact, as a regulator, we were very much optimistic and also very much supportive, so that things move very in the right way, in the speedy way. And most importantly, another issue is that normally, if it would not be the COVID period, our office time limits only certain boundaries. Maybe it's 9 to 5, like that. But as this is a COVID period, all the things, in fact, it has been shifted. There is nothing called 9 to 5 office. In fact, we go up to it's a 24/7 office. So even during the holiday of our Eid al-Fitr, we had been working, and we had been ensuring that all the network remains up, and all the stakeholders, they can work together and they can move smoothly. We rendered all out support from our end, so that there is no bottleneck in this whole process. So we have ensured that even during the to ensure the network stability, the operators sometimes they need some equipments which need to be imported from the other countries. So we have ensured that those process, in fact, that doesn't take much of time, and even at the late hour of the night, we ensure that the no objection certificate is being issued to the operators, so that they can bring the things which is being required for to ensure and to enhance their network capacity. And also apart from this, in fact, as I mentioned, that we have already moved ourselves from the fixed office timing. Now we are available 24/7. So anytime and every time, whenever any operator, any stakeholder, they need any support from the regulator side, we had been always available. Even not only the regulator, our ministries also remain available to support all out, so that everything moves smoothly. Even people cannot move out from their home or move out from any other places. People physically, they were locked down, but electronically or telecom networks, if I consider that, they were not locked down. They were rather open, and they could work from home and from anywhere. So that's all, in fact, from the regulator's point of view, that we could render to the telecom ecosystem. Thank you.
That's some really good insights, Director General. And it's very interesting to hear you say that the networks never go into lockdown. They are working 24/7 now. And to hear some of the initiatives you mentioned, like the extension of the backbone and also making the clearance of equipment, much easier, so that operators can be able to expand the networks within this period. So we'll come back to Claire very shortly to hear how their members have responded to these initiatives. But before then, let me just go to Shahid. Shahid, you've been working very closely with a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of women, especially in the agri sector as well. So what has been the response during this period? How have they been able to cope with getting access to digital services during this period?
Thank you, Eleanor. In fact, I will echo with what Anil Bhai was mentioning, that COVID-19 in fact opened up some new opportunities, and since we have been pursuing this thing, that use of ICT for entrepreneurship, agriculture and nutrition, it was very difficult to convince them. Some of them they was not very much familiar to use this thing, but when they didn't have any other options rather than using IT, so now everybody is trying to adopt this thing. So that was the first thing we observed immediately after the COVID situation broke down. And then basically we had a couple of things doing. One was like a program we work with the ICT division, and the program was Wi-Fi. It's not an internet Wi-Fi, it's a Women ICT Frontiers initiative of UN ESCAP, and UN APC ICT is implementing this thing. In Bangladesh, we are executing this thing. This program basically offer to the women entrepreneurs who need digital skills to manage their businesses. So initially it was like we invited people to come to Dhaka and join this program. It was very difficult to do because not all the women are able to come from outside Dhaka. So only selected or the privileged communities are participating. But after the COVID situation, we contacted with the ICT division and requested them to allow us to conduct this session online. So when we went to online, now I found the women entrepreneurs from the remote locations, they're also participating. So that's a huge thing. We felt that now we can be more inclusive in terms of targeting our audience. But at the same time, we identified the gaps, like the digital skill gap. And in fact, I was in the afternoon, I was attending another meeting of Bangladesh Small Cottage Industries Corporation, and as well as the Grass Association. And we felt that they never thought that, okay, online thing can become more important in terms of learning, in terms of their business growth, and in terms of the ICT uses for their business management. So I felt the women entrepreneurship is much more convenient at this point of time, but due to the lockdown situation and the restriction of movements, the transaction is getting little slow, but definitely those things will be improved very soon. So that is one perspective we felt, but at the same time, since we work in the agriculture domain, what we found that extension services, it was very difficult to reach farmers. Like I can give you the latest examples. We have been working with another development agency, CIMIT, and we offered market price information as well as the weather alert and agronomy information via IVR based system. So the farmers in very remote southern belt, he don't need to come to the extension officer, or neither the extension officer needs to go to him or her. So rather, this IT ecosystem enabled them to avail the services. So I feel that this COVID also gave us some opportunities to reinvent this potential of ICT. So from my side, I think these are the two very field experience I wanted to just share to give an understanding that how COVID also revealed some more potential of IT and the internet. And definitely the connectivity is a big issue, because while we're doing this thing, we also felt that people don't have smartphones. When we talk about to avail many other services, so we have to keep that in mind, that okay, how then we build skills, and the solutions has to be more prone to the very basic kind of services. So these are the issues we are going through, but at the same time, we do see that people are now more getting into these services. Thank you, Eleanor.
Yeah, so Shahid, it's really exciting to hear that sometimes one crisis can actually present an opportunity for you and to hear that the women are also gravitating more towards trying to get more digital skills and also be more conversant with some of the services that's come in the digital space. So one disaster can be an opportunity for somebody else, and that's what I are seeing in this space. So it's great to hear some of the practical examples. So coming back to you, Claire, you heard from the Director General, you heard some of the initiatives that that they've put in place to stimulate the industry. Do you think that is enough? What would you like to see? And if some of these short-term interventions, do you want them to be long-term to be able to support your members so that they can also contribute more to the sector? What are your thoughts?
Thanks. So I'm a big believer in data and sort of evidence-based approaches. So I'm gonna share a couple of stats. So if we look at Bangladesh, there's about 5% of the population that are not covered by a 3G or 4G mobile broadband network. And I think expanding this coverage is more of an economic challenge rather than a technical one. So certainly there's support to be done there and streamlining process. And as the Brigadier General mentioned, it's been great that there's been some support, that the support has been provided with importing equipment. But I also want to flag that if you look at those who are covered, who are in coverage areas with mobile broadband, but are not using that, 70% of the population in Bangladesh live within a network, but are not using the mobile internet. And so I think it highlights that there's also these sort of demand side challenges, and we need to tackle them, and it's been raised. So I think affordability is absolutely a critical issue. And it's been mentioned by Shahid that, the handsets and getting access to those phones is a critical issue. We need the digital skills, again, that's been highlighted. We need the relevant services. We need things to be safe and secure. So I think that there's still a lot more work to be done. And if you look at the gender issue, women are 52% less likely to use mobile internet in Bangladesh than men. So we need to also have a gender lens to some of this work. And I think it's things like, making sure that things like high cost of spectrum and high sector specific taxes, do have negative impacts in terms of making things less affordable. So we need to look at the sort of range of issues, and we need to look at both the coverage issue and the uses issue and how we can help people to access and use, particularly, and I was really welcome the talk by so many speakers about gender, because, women, there is a gender gap, but also women are also being disproportionately negatively impacted by COVID. A lot of the burden around sort of getting, education, also sort of loss of income and such is also really affecting women. So I think it's great to hear that there's this sort of focus and we should have it. So I would just sort of say, I think there's a lot of work that's been done, but we need to look holistically at the barriers, and we need to make sure that these are being tackled, and that that it's done in a joint collaborative way, with the industry and government working hand in hand to try and address some of the challenges that are still there, to make sure that those citizens who aren't included, are included, particularly in the time of COVID, where the internet is such a lifeline, where this is really the tool, as we heard from the people who are accessing education now, accessing healthcare. So we need to really prioritize, making sure that those who are not included are, the policy frameworks are in place to support those.
And Claire, you mentioned, I'm glad you brought in the gender lens. I knew you would do that because you're head of Committed Women as well. So yeah, it's exciting to hear that. But the stats are very staggering, and yeah, it's important to actually realize that we are talking about a segment of people who are disproportionately affected. And one thing we do know is that income levels tend to differ between men and women. So that naturally, that also affects the affordability. So I think, Anir, you might be able to speak a little bit more about the the demand side challenges, how do you think we can improve digital skills? It's been raised by Shahid, and also Claire has just mentioned it. But in your work in A2I, what have you seen? What lessons do you think we can learn from improving the demand side, the digital skills in Bangladesh?
Well, I have two views about that, and they are personal. So one view is that not focusing too much on the demand side, but making sure that we do the right design thinking when we design products. So digital literacy being brought up to the level that we are comfortable with is not the right way to go. So build products. For instance, when we build payment products, we have seen that in the last few years, women's digital inclusion actually did not fall, but did not increase as much as men's. So men's financial inclusion went from about mid-30s to about mid-60s, almost 30% jump, whereas women's went from about mid-20s to about mid-30s, so just a 10% jump. Why is that? Because we have not built products to the needs of the women. So women who are at households, women who don't have access to mobile phones. So we need to figure out a different paradigm. So that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is that, okay, this is how you use digital technology. So you have to bring everybody's digital literacy to that level. So they're two different approaches, and I think both are necessary. So I would suggest that when we build products, we look at the needs, the designs that will actually work for them. In terms of increasing digital literacy on the demand side, if you were to do that, again, we have to probably use multiple approaches. One approach is creating and making sure that they have assisted forms. So essentially, let's take the example of our digital centers. So digital centers were created since 2007 and launched countrywide in 2010 in about 4,500 locations to actually create this assistance that people needed to access digital services. And that has paid huge dividends because one, it was a bottom-up approach. We could not have taken a top-down approach and reached the rural areas. So that bottom-up approach helped. Right now, as I said, there are 5 to 6 million people who go to these digital centers and access services. About 150 to 200 different types of services that range from getting a birth registration to getting a land record to getting a passport to doing banking to doing e-commerce. So e-commerce was actually designed to take to the rural areas based on these digital centers. So if we were to design e-commerce by thinking how people in the urban areas with digital literacy use e-commerce, then we would never get there. So this is something we call the rural assisted e-commerce, so that you get that assistance. Somebody would go to these centers and would actually be able to list their products, or go to these centers to be able to look at product listing and then make an order. And these digital centers also help them with logistics, help them with payments. So they're the bridge between the analog world and the digital world for a lot of the demand side. So I think that's something that's very important that may need to continue for some time.
Yeah, and
in terms of of direct access to technologies, obviously there is a lot of digital literacy that also needs to be done. So that will require huge campaigns. That will require, in some cases, linking with products such as financial literacy. So digital literacy and financial literacy may have to go hand in hand in many cases as well. So it's not just looking at digital literacy in the way that we look at it for the upper echelons of society, but we have to take a look at a very different lens for the bottom of the pyramid, is my recommendation.
So I like the fact that you talk about co-creation, because that's the word I would say, co-creating the products with the beneficiaries, and also understanding that it's very relevant to them. So it's very important that you do mention that. So, you know, one important part of all this, if we're going to talk about infrastructure, digital skills, demand side, it requires funding. So I'm coming back to you, Krista, because you're in that development space. I wanted to understand whether there were any specific initiatives, funding initiatives that DAI has been using, or any of the other development sector members that you're aware of, to support entrepreneurs or operators during this period, and what's the response has been so far?
Sure. Thanks, Eleanor. And I'll add a few, a few ideas and the things that we see as an organization that looks for funding. We do scan and sort of see where funding opportunities exist, and I've definitely seen an increase from a range of funders in response to COVID, and it's really heartening in a lot of ways to see sort of some of the funders pivot and kind of realign some of their initiatives. So I would highlight the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and some of the ways that they're pivoting a lot of their funding or some of their funding to respond. I would also point out, we know that USAID and the UK government are also, looking to fund large activities and kind of recalibrate their portfolios in order to respond. And then I see a lot of smaller activities, a lot of smaller initiatives happening where there may be, a $50,000 or $200,000 kind of range of specifically focused on digital, where we're seeing either private sector or smaller actors put forward funds that that organizations can apply for. We work with USAID on a mechanism called the Digital Frontiers Project, and it is a demand-driven program where USAID missions can buy in essentially and kind of sign up to participate, and then they get access to a set of resources, support, and kind of advisory services, and that's through the Digital Frontiers mechanism. And I'll just highlight an example of an activity that we're doing in Bangladesh with women, kind of tying back into that conversation a little bit, and some of the challenges that that women, and particularly women in the agriculture sector, face. So we're working with Solidaridad through a buy-in called Women Connect, and this was a co-created kind of challenge that was run around increasing women's access and also use of digital tools to improve their lives, to improve their incomes. And so we're working with Solidaridad in Bangladesh. They're a women dairy farmers organization, and we're looking to increase their empowerment and their income, and also address social norms through providing tools for like family planning and family financial planning discussions, and financial literacy trainings, and modern dairy practices through an app that women can access, as well as an interactive voice response, which I think was mentioned, which is a great tool where people without smartphones can kind of call in and get extension services and extension information. And so just to highlight that, I think that in the funding space there are significant opportunities. I think that the government kind of engagement that is so obvious, and clear in the Bangladesh use case is really powerful and a great way to connect with donors as well, given that there are these specific needs that we're talking about today that are around digital upskilling and digital readiness and things that are quite tangible. And I think there could be really good funding partnerships in that space.
I'm pretty sure that some people will be taking notes now, because funding is such a big issue in a time of crisis, and so being able to know how to access those funds and also what the opportunities are going to be very crucial. And I think that's a perfect segue again back to you, Brigadier General, because we want to know beyond, for now and beyond, what kind of collaborations do you need? Because we've talked about cooperation and collaboration earlier. What kind of collaboration do you need between the private sector, between the development sector, between civil society, in order to be able to close some of those gaps you've identified now during this period? The gaps with connectivity, the gaps with access and the gaps with demand services as well. So what kind of collaborations do you require to do this?
Thank you very much, Ms. Ilana. In fact, to answer your question, in fact, I should say that there should be some target-oriented and coordinated plan. And it should be the operators who are serving the people during this crisis. They must have some kind of planning ahead, so that the duplication of effort is not there. And if they work on a coordinated platform, in fact, the operator side as well as the government machineries, if they work together and they know what to do and when to do, then thereby they can address the need and they address the crisis also, as well as then their efforts in all the sector will be more effective in nature. So this is one thing. And another thing is that their serving could have been together on cost sharing basis. Say some gaps which are being identified from the networks or the service perspective during this crisis period. If operators try to address the gaps with their peer in a cost sharing basis given in their licensing scope, I think that will be more appropriate from the viewpoint of efficient resource management during this crisis, when opportunities is very much limited. And this kinds of sharing, this can be done both in both vertically or horizontally. It would be in a win-win situation for all the stakeholders. I mean the private sectors or as well as the public sectors. So apart from this, in fact, what I feel that our operators, in fact, the private sector from the government machineries or the public's demand or to meet this crisis. In fact, to be very frank, that from government machineries, it is not possible to support all the corners, but you can always make some arrangements so that the private companies, they can come forward and they can work together. And we categorically, in fact, we are requesting and also we are proposing and we are helping the companies to come forward with their efforts, and so that like to ensure that their bandwidth remains available to the end users. In fact, to the if I talk about the rural areas where people have limited access to the network, so we ensure that they we request the private companies, I mean the operators, stakeholders of the telecom sector, to work in the rural areas so that they build their network and allow the end user, I mean our mass people, to access to the network. So we can always guide them, we can help them being remaining within the bindings of the policies and the licensing condition. But obviously we try to go away from the box to help the private companies as well as so that they can render support to the unreached people who need the bandwidth or who need the network during this crisis period. Thank you.
I'm glad you mentioned the rural connectivity, because it's very, very important. And you know, I know that in some countries, what governments and regulators have done is to offer some kind of tax incentives so that you can have more operators expanding into rural areas. Is this something that you know, you might want to consider, or is this something that you're already doing? You know, offering some kind of tax incentive so that operators can be more encouraged to move into rural areas.
In fact, this tax issue, in fact, to be very frank, from the regulator's point of view, we really do not have much of access to the tax reduction and other places, because we have another department, National Bureau of Revenues, who all are dealing with these tax issues. But what we do that we give some kind of flexibility to the operators to come forward, even say for example during to bring their equipments, or to ensure that they need more times to roll out their network equipments, or to ensure that they need to get their network equipments or other resources quickly. We try to help in that way. And obviously we are asking the operators not to charge to the end user much during this crisis period, because our rural areas, many people, they do not have much of financial capabilities during this crisis period. So there are certain proposition given from the government machineries to the operators to ensure that they really do not disconnect the people who could not pay their bills in due time, to allow some more times, so that the end user, they can come over from this crisis moment, and they can stand onto their foot, and in the later part they can always pay their due bills and other things. So in fact that's all we could do from the regulator's point of view.
I was hoping. I'm sure Claire would be excited. Claire, you've heard the regulator speak. What do you think? What are some of the interventions you need now within the short term and long term to ensure that your members could expand further into rural areas and perhaps not pass cost on to consumers as the regulator wants to happen? What do you think?
Yeah, I think these are really important issues, and I think we need to sort of, as I say, it's the coverage issue is it's more of a kind of economic challenge. We just need to be sort of streamlining processes. We need to be working across government departments to make sure things like spectrum and tax and stuff are favorable, and that there's a proper enabling environment for these things, and also supporting on some of the access, the sort of usage issues that are stopping people. So I think it's just, these are complex issues, and it needs a sort of multi-stakeholder, cross-government, cross-stakeholder kind of coordinated response with open dialogue, discussion, and collaboration to work together to tackle these challenges. And yeah, so that's what I would say to that one.
I think that it's very important. Collaboration is going to be very key, and that's why we started this conversation, and that's what we are going to be doing some more of in the Alliance for Affordable Internet, because it's one that it's I would say it's a journey, and there are different phases and there are different hurdles in the way. So it's not very simplistic. But I think if we all believe that we can, we all believe on the end goal of connecting everyone with affordable and meaningful connectivity, then we know how to progress effectively. So I know we're getting to we just going a bit over time. So quickly on the last two questions, one to you, Shahid. What would entrepreneurs need during this period from both the operators and from the regulator to ensure that they could connect effectively within a crisis, whether during this crisis or future crisis?
Thank you, Eleanor. In fact, what we felt like that if we could offer the small, especially the micro enterprises, if we could offer some incentives and a special package kind of thing, that okay, yes, because internet is very expensive at certain point. If you are doing e-commerce and doing all these online things, it's not that very cheap. So for general use, it's okay. But when you come with this kind of business, and when the business is not that very good, so I think the regulators can consider, or there might be some other options from the telcos that they offer sometimes some special prices. And I found that at certain point in Bangladesh, there was a free talk time in the middle of night, and the whole young kids are going into the whole night talking over phone. But I never seen this thing for this type of productive purposes, that okay, if the telcos could offer this thing, that for the micro enterprises, they can avail the service during this particular thing and for this particular space. So those kind of special things can be offered by the operators, so that the micro enterprises, particularly this during this situation, they can at least do something, get some benefits out of it. So that might be an option for the small businesses. And at the same time, I just want to add one thing I missed out. In Bangladesh, there are so many initiatives to empower the women, particularly the entrepreneurs who are working in the as in businesses. And there are financial incentives, there are business incentives, lot of incentives. But the problem is the information is not going out to the target audience. So they don't know what the offer is there. Like very recently, the government had offered a credit guarantee scheme. But while I was talking to the Grassroots Women Entrepreneurs Association, even the organizing secretary could not tell me what is the benefit they can avail for this kind of crisis. So this information also need to be gone out, and again, the technology is the solution to reach out this type of information to the target audience. So that kind of things can be done by the regulators or even the financial institutes, even the banking regulator like the Bangladesh Bank can do something like that. Especially they have entrepreneur development program, women entrepreneur development program, and all the banks are supposed to support women entrepreneurs with the credit facilities and some facilities at the branch level. But the target audience, the women entrepreneurs, they don't know that, okay, these are the facilities available at this point of time. So I think there is also room for collaboration here. Like A2I has established huge network of digital centers, and the government has their own machineries. If the information could be flown down to these entrepreneurs, that might be an also empower these entrepreneurs as well as build their capacity to ask for their right as well as their stake of financing or other skill programs, because I do see hundreds of initiatives at this point in Bangladesh for particularly women entrepreneurs. Thank you.
It's great to hear that you see all these potential for initiatives, and to see again, just echoing what Claire had said about collaboration, very, very important if we really want to reach the masses. And back to you, Anir, for the comments before we take some questions. What else would you want to see from the private sector and also maybe from the regulator? What policy changes or interventions would you like to see in order for us to be able to reach more people, during this crisis and beyond?
I think other panelists have alluded to it. I'll probably just borrow from some of their insights. One is innovative pricing, not just telco products or traditional, what we know as the value-added services, VAS. VAS traditionally has come in the form of entertainment. They've all been in the entertainment space. But why can't we really have infinite number of VAS products in education, in loan, in agriculture, in healthcare? And these products will be difficult to be designed by the telcos themselves. They have to then bring in the demand side and also bring in startup companies and maybe established companies. So there is experimentation going on right now. So health insurance is one area that we are seeing some experimentation. But I think this can be actually unleashed. That there are so many opportunities that, as Mr. Shahid talked about, so many different opportunities where you can create digital products just by bundling in non-digital products with the digital access. And this is where I think that the regulator can actually play a very key regulation, perhaps. So bringing in, so this is where, I mean, what we have seen is the telco regulator, and the Brigadier General Mahfouz is here, and the financial space regulator, Bangladesh Bank, they have come together on some issues. But then the meeting that we had yesterday, we had one DG from BTRC, the chairman was there, the telecom minister, the education minister, and all the 4 CEOs of the telcos were there. And we're talking about how to bring down the cost of internet for students. We have about 3 million students in the tertiary education. We launched a product about a month ago for e-learning of tertiary education. And that's just one example. If we bring it down to secondary, we're talking about more than 10 million students. If we bring it down to the primary, we're talking about more than 20 million students. So the entire education space is about 45 million learners. So that covers a very large clientele. Now, what kind of innovative education products have we really seen that can be pushed out to the telcos? Not a whole lot yet. Maybe one telco that I know has done some work, but again, it's very restricted. So a lot of experimentation across multiple different product space, collaboration that we have not seen before that can be catalyzed by the regulator also, I think.
Some opportunities that I see then that you've mentioned. So we have quite a few questions actually. And the first question says that Bangladesh appears to be prioritizing short-term or urgent needs to alleviate fiscal stress induced by the pandemic. So it goes to the raising of sectoral taxes. I wonder who might be able to take this one, perhaps Brigadier General. So the question is whether you are prioritizing short-term, raising of taxes, sacrificing that for some benefit in the long term. So would you be comfortable answering this question?
As I mentioned that, in fact, as a regulator, we really do not deal directly with the taxes. In fact, it is somewhere or other it's dealt by other sectors, but definitely, in fact, it is not in the purview of my jurisdiction. In fact, the tax is being dealt by others. In fact, I better not to comment on this.
I wonder if any of the other panelists has an insight on sector-specific taxation, because I do know that you mentioned that the National Bureau of Revenues controls it, but does the industry has a say in the taxes that are slapped on sector members, for instance?
Let me take a crack at that.
All right.
Sure. So there is negotiation. So when taxes are imposed, there is a discussion with the particular sector, be it telco, be it any other sector. So there is negotiation, and decisions are not always done together, but the discussion happens together.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, so there is maybe some truth to the short-term versus long-term trade-off. And I personally would like to see more focus on the long-term. But looking at this particular year, where we have not done very well in revenues, I mean, we were supposed to grow quite a bit. We shrunk just a little bit, about 3% or so in terms of revenue. Our expectation, or the fear, I should say, our fear was that we would shrink by a lot more, but fortunately that has not happened. But still, we shrank a little bit, where we were supposed to grow. At the beginning of the year, when we looked at the projection, it was much larger. And during COVID, it shrank. So we may have to do some short-termism just to make the country survive at the cost of long-termism. But in the general space, I think long-termism should really decide how we do taxation.
Yeah. And so I guess that's a wider conversation with a lot more sectors really, and this is a challenge that's not peculiar to Bangladesh alone. By the way, during this period, we are also seeing that countries are beginning to juggle essential hospitals, healthcare, with raising internal revenues as well. So it's a very dicey situation.
We've increased our healthcare expenditure, healthcare budget by about 29%. Our budget for the expatriate welfare, even though a lot of our expatriates are coming back because of COVID, we've increased the welfare there by about 13%. So these are all increases in budget, which will have to come from somewhere, just in the short term.
Right. And I think there was another question about e-learning, but I believe that you know, you addressed that in your one of your answers. And I think the final question was what is the plan to improve the quality of service of operators who are dependent on the NTTN fiber? I'm not sure what NTTN is. But
National Telecom Transmission Network. So it's basically the ones who are providing network fibers across the country.
Yes, what's the plan to improve the quality of service? Would this be something that you would like to take, Brigadier General?
Yeah, thank you very much. In fact, I think this subject the question is related to me. Very pertinent question. In fact, the MNO's quality of service mostly dependent on the NTTN fiber is true, but there are certain other issues as well. The quality of service solely and does not mean that only that they depends on the NTTN fiber. There are certain other parameters where we can judge the quality of service, like spectrum issues, then ensuring the power supply throughout the network, and there are many other issues also. So, as the question came up, whatever the NTTN fiber, we are also preparing some kind of quality of service for the NTTN fibers, so that they are also being responsible to ensure the backbone for the whole communication network. So it is in the pipeline. Hopefully, we'll be able to prepare the quality of service guidelines for all the stakeholders in the ecosystem. Not only the NTTN, we have the guidelines for the mobile operators. We'll ensure that we are working for preparing the guidelines for the NTTN fiber, then ISPs. We are also working for the IGW and IIG, everyone. So that because they are dependent on each other. So we are ensuring and we are preparing, and hopefully in the near future, we'll have the guidelines, and we can also ensure that the NTTN fibers companies, they are maintaining their quality parameters to ensure the quality of service of the other users like MNOs, like broadband services, and other details. So that's all, in fact, about this NTTN fiber.
I have a feeling you probably know the person who sent you the question, but yeah, it was a great answer you gave. And you know, we're just about to we're just running out of time. I really wanted this conversation to go on, but it's just shown that there is so much that we could explore in this space. So I want to thank all my panelists. I want to thank Claire Siptop from GSMA, Krista Baptista from DAI, Shahid Uddin Akbar, who's a national coordinator for IFOIA Bangladesh, Brigadier General, who is the Director General of the BTRC, and Ani Chowdhury, who is the Policy Advisor to the Prime Minister at A2I. And thank you all for the time. If there's a big takeaway from this session, it's about collaboration. It's the fact that there needs to be a phased approach in the way we look at the issues of managing internet access through crisis, the issues of usage, connectivity, of demand services that we need to discuss, and funding as well. And we can only do that if we are collaborating and we ensure that there's a thriving regulatory environment to do this. So thank you all for listening to us. Anju, I think you can wrap it up now.
Great. Thank you so much, Eleanor. And also thank you so much to the speakers, panelists. I really, really enjoyed it. It's 2:29 a.m. right now for me in Fiji, but I'm still awake and enjoying this conversation. So I would like to invite our panelists and speakers to reflect on how we can work together to coordinate and mobilize our efforts. And again, as Eleanor said, that we need to collaborate. So pulling together our resources to achieve the Digital Bangladesh and SDG targets. And I would also like to encourage our other stakeholders, particularly in Bangladesh, our regulators, our operators, academia, civil societies, policymakers, not just in ICT, but in all the sectors of the government, to collaborate so we can have a conducive environment for ICTs and also meaningful connectivity. So on that note, I would also like to thank our attendees. Thank you so much. And I hope we were able to answer your questions. We will be able to share presentations and also other documentation. This will be on our A4AI website and also Web Foundation. So feel free to go through our website. And yeah, so thank you so much. Together, I guess we can fight this pandemic and take care. Be safe and stay healthy. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Because can I just get a photo, please? So sorry. I'll just get a photo.
You want us to smile?
Yes, I want everyone to smile. Michael, are you there as well?
Yeah, I am here.
Okay, thank you so much again. I will take a really, I hope I get it right, huh? I am techie savvy, but sometimes I can't get it right with Zoom.
Since we're going to tweet it. Okay.
Okay, I got it. Okay, one more with a big smile. So thank you so much again. Yes, I've done it. I will tweet. And thank you again. Take care.
All right. Let's please send the pictures to everyone so they can also, if they want to tweet it. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'll send you my slides, Sanju.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Krista. Thank you, Shahid.